Hey, welcome to Lab, the podcast. I'm Zach Elliott, and this is Wendy Kieffer. Wendy is V3's Conservatory Poet, and a part of her role is helping us to, as Lewis would say, irrigate the desert. And poetry is an art form that allows us to embody and to access and to express our faith in ways that do that, which is really, really important in our cultural moment. So, Wendy, thank you for making this a part of your regular work. It's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited to be here again. This is awesome.
Yeah, it's been a gift, this ongoing kind of space to create with the podcast for poetry to be a regular rhythm and cadence, which is kind of what poetry is. So
Mhm.
this is good. This is a little bit of a different moment. We always talk about things being commingled, the reality that we don't do straight lines and simple math in life. There's a complexity, there's layers of good, at the same time broken, and a future. And all of that, we feel it every day. Deep joy and deep suffering, kind of we're touching and holding both. And that's certainly the moment that we're in. Last time we were together, still a war in Ukraine. Since then, a mass shooting here in Tampa. 2 people lost their lives in Ybor City. In our city, 16 people were shot. There was a homicide very close to here. And since October 7th, just tragedy on top of tragedy in the Middle East. So all of those things are together amidst all the joy that we
Yeah,
all experience. So I know I feel that. You're an artist and an empathetic person. How are you feeling? Are you feeling that weight right now?
absolutely. Yeah, no, and something like October 7th was just a massive tragedy of a very unique kind that really impacted me personally and my family. And I think like you said, as being an empath, there's a power in it, and then there's certain pitfalls that you kind of walk that line between carrying both. I think we were just reading in David Taylor's book about having faithful feelings. And so those feelings that align with God's heart, that are faithful. And I think there was a part of me that, I forced myself to watch some of the footage so that I could feel what I was supposed to feel. But it just broke my heart because, you can only feel so much. So naturally, subconsciously, it's just poems start coming, and that's my way of making sense of those feelings, of putting some kind of putting the words to the feelings and letting those be that kind of release. So I'm happy that I have that, and I've written quite a few since this whole sort of new tragedy, new stirring in the world has happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that, again, the gift of artists and poets particularly to do that, because a lot of us feel, I know I do,
Mm-hmm.
we're removed in some ways from these
Yeah.
things, and we see them, but they're very distant. There's a lot of people who are experiencing that piercing pain personally. That's
Right.
their day-to-day experience. There's a lot of us then that are feeling it, and those feelings are real. It's not though that we're not feeling it, but it's from a distance.
Right.
And so sometimes it's not harder, but it's difficult to have language because we're not in it, and yet
Mm-hmm.
we feel something of it. And I think you have the ability to help, and artists have the ability to help us bridge that divide and say, this is what I'm feeling, even though I'm not there in the moment. So I don't have my own language for it, but
Right.
somebody's helping me. And in this case, with what's going on in Israel
Mm-hmm.
and in the Middle East, the pain all over on all sides of that, you're feeling a particular pain, you and your family.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you about that, if you're willing to share just a bit about that, because
Mm-hmm.
for you, this touches you embody your faith as a part of a Messianic Jewish community.
Right.
And so this particular violence that's broken out in some ways affecting you personally and your
Mm-hmm.
congregation, and it's caused you to think about your family and your story. How is
That's right.
that impacting you?
Yeah, I think you feel it in a very visceral way. You feel suddenly looking at your 4 children and thinking this kind of hate exists in the world for you. And it becomes a lot more personal. I think, sometimes you can just be coasting and living your life. And I think I turned to my husband and I said, and maybe we can get into the story of how we landed in Messianic Judaism, but it's something that was reclaimed from his identity. It's something that we felt called to do. And so I turned to him and I said, do you realize that we are walking out a calling, aligning ourselves with a people that has been so historically discriminated against and hated? Wow, we're in this in a way that we felt it more profoundly. We're saying our prayers before eating, and I could even hear my son articulating the Hebrew in a different way, like just, committing to that and saying, yes, this is a part now of our story as well.
Yeah. I think we're all kind of trying to make sense of it from our different vantage points. And so it's helpful. I appreciate you sharing that, even just the glimpse into a dinner table, because we forget that the way people are processing from their family and their family's story and Billy's family story, and that we can't separate ourselves from that. And that's true on all sides. There's people in every side of this conflict saying, but this is what my voice and my perspective is. And so last night we had the opportunity to hear from a woman who got her PhD at Oxford, brilliant woman, and she was invited recently to a really significant event to make the case for the Christian faith. And she only had 15 minutes to do it. And which would be, where do you start, right? And her starting point was actually the pain that we feel that almost leads to outrage. When we feel something like or see something like what happened on October 7th, and we say there has to be a payment paid or a justice made for this offense, the loss of thousands of civilian lives.
Right.
And yet, on other sides of that, people are saying, I demand justice, or I demand a payment or a death on my side. And it feels like we're caught and we don't know what to do with that. And she said there's actually an opportunity there, because what is it in us that feels that sense of moral outrage to the point that we feel like a death is required? And she said there's something that's true about that. And it doesn't matter what line you're crossing, but there is a line that is crossed, that something in us, we're not just random atoms and chance. There's something moral in us that says, no, a line has been crossed, and it's so significant that a death is due. And she brings it brilliantly home to saying it could be a social death, it could be a career death, it could be you're cast out, but there's some symbolic way that a death occurs to atone for that. And she said, we actually want and need to say yes to that, because if we don't, we diminish what somebody's going through. We diminish the reality that they've experienced of a gross injustice or a violence or something has happened. She said, but at the same time, if we say yes to that, it can become a prison. And she said, it seems particular to the Christian faith that something allows, there's a way forward where the death of the Son of God actually entering in that story is able to say yes to that desire and that sense of moral outrage that would demand a death and a payment for something so horrific, and at the same time set you free by the act of mercy that says you're not imprisoned to it. There is a way of redemption. I just thought that was beautiful in a moment like ours. How is your faith? Are you feeling that your faith helps you when your family feels this sense and your son is groaning in this way in his prayers? Is the Christian faith helpful in setting you free from that pain that would just lock you in a cycle of almost eye for eye or vengeance?
Right. Yeah, there's so many scriptures that I think have come to mind that are just crystallize this moment, like when the Lord says, vengeance is mine, I will repay. This is not for you. When I think I was mentioning to you earlier, Revelation 12, where it says they overcame by the blood of the Lamb and the power of their testimony, and they did not love their lives so much to shrink from death. I think when we think about what it takes to walk this out, is a faith that says, Lord, you are the judge. Vengeance or justice is ultimately beyond my capacity,
Mm.
but that is your zone, and I submit to that. My part in it is to walk this out in faith, in the strength of my testimony, the blood of the Lamb, and the strength of saying, there are worse things than dying.
Mm. Mm.
In other words, what we live for, we can't cling to this life so much that our purpose and our greater calling is somehow diminished by this, need for comfort and safety.
Mm.
And so when you're in a moment, a cultural moment where you're feeling less safety, less comfort, when you're feeling like, should I go to that protest or that rally? Will I be safe? Can I go to synagogue? Will I be safe? When you're feeling those things, you're crying out to God and saying, you are my safety.
Mm.
You are my hiding place. And if you have called me to this, you will give me the strength to walk it out. But I will not shrink back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not only not shrink back, but I hear you saying too, not be imprisoned by the desire
Yeah.
for vengeance, that just, it's a poison. You were saying earlier, it's a poison within yourselves.
Yep.
And the Jewish community there's poets that have given voice to this. They have experienced this at other times in seasons. And you were referencing a group of people who were literally going out of their way to forgive particular people who had persecuted them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a story I read years ago about these Holocaust survivors. I believe most of them were Christian, had given their lives to Jesus, and they were at an event where they were forgiving Nazi soldiers who were, kneeling at their feet and begging for forgiveness. And they had a lot of pushback from different members of the Jewish community. How could you forgive that? Mm. That is a wrong to forgive. Yeah. You are wronging our community. And the woman who was writing this book, she said, well, hate has an address in your body. Mm. It lives in your body. My stomach, I had ulcers. I had so much wrong with my body. And when I forgave, not only am I doing this in the strength of Messiah, not in my own natural ability, but the relief that I felt in my soul, my entire body, I realized that hate that I was carrying was poison. Mm. And so to let go of that, it's obviously you are extending the ultimate mercy, but you are also alleviating that strain on yourself. So it's, so that's just one of the stories I remember reading about that I think we were referencing earlier.
Yeah, I just think it's so wonderful. I appreciated what Dr. Ewing did in just bringing that to the light in this sense, or in this moment, to say there's a remarkable treasure when Jesus says, hey, follow me. Yeah. I'm going to lead you in a way that will allow you to be a human who is immersed in a world with great beauty and great joy, but also great sorrow and great offense. And that's the reality of the world that we are in. Mm. And to not be imprisoned by it, and to not allow your sense of justice to be taken away, and for you to somehow say that these things don't matter, or that these things are, it isn't moral weakness to forgive, but that there's a way forward that allows you this powerful hope and a horizon that wouldn't be possible. And I love that. It is a way forward. So for everybody listening, just, I guess the first part of this conversation, I just wanted to say, we feel it too. So I think a lot of people I've talked to say, I don't know, the last part of October, early part of November just felt heavy. There was so much heaviness. Yep. And we want to say that's okay. There's going to be poetry readings where we are filled with joy, and it seems like all is right. And there's those seasons of orientation, and that's true too. But this one does feel particularly heavy. So I'm grateful that we get to do this. And if you're listening, if you're feeling all those things, so are we. That we're all feeling those. And what a great gift we've been given in the deep, deep roots of our faith. And just go back and listen to that a little bit. There is something particularly wonderful about being able to say yes to pain at such a level that we say it does demand death. That's why it feels the way it feels. And yet we don't have to take that in our own hands nor ignore that. There is something that's been done. And that it leads you literally to a place of worship, which is extraordinary. So this be in that moment, this is part of what we're trying to recover, as I said, to irrigate the desert, to allow us to have language and voice for the pain we feel and the weight we feel, so that we can express our faith authentically, but also live together in a way that allows us to hear each other and to be with each other and for each other. And so you selected a poem and a poet for this month, and it really, again, it comes from you as a poet. And so I actually asked, there was a couple that we could have chosen from, and you kind of laid out a few that gave voice to this sense of pain and weight. But your poem in particular struck me, and I asked if you would be willing to take us through your poem. So would you do that?
Absolutely. I'm honored. Yeah. So I'll just give a little background briefly. A lot of things were going around either through social media or getting texts from friends. And I read one in particular. It was a blog post. And this Jewish writer was saying, the visceral sense of threat is rising up. You're feeling insecure and you're wondering, who would hide me? You're looking around at your friends and your communities and the people, your neighbors and the people around you, and you're saying, would you hide me? You know, that is underneath the surface of just wondering who is for you, who would be with you, how many people would link arms with me if I was ever under that kind of threat again. And that hit me so hard, you know, that the Holocaust is less than 100 years old. And so the memory of that is very alive and well in so many hearts and minds and stories and families. And so that idea of saying, should anything like that ever happen again, that kind of a threat, it really was important for me to sort of voice from, you know, a person who's lived my life up until I came to faith in Messiah, lived my life outside of any Jewish context. I love this story because it was actually faith in Messiah that brought us into a Jewish context, which typically it's the other way around. It brings you out. But yeah, so since part of my life is lived outside of that community, and you know, in Hitler's Nazi Germany, he considered you Jewish if at least one grandparent was Jewish. And so I found out much later that my grandmother's grandmother was Jewish, and I had two dreams back when I was an early believer of my grandmother baking challah. And then they were both two dreams, the same exact dream. And I was like, huh. And I found out later that her grandmother was Jewish. And so that little piece of the puzzle came to me later. And so when I wrote this poem, it's for those who feel like they're outside, that you know, you're outside of the community. What is your response? But also of a person who's now chosen to be inside the community through faith and practice and tradition. My husband's grandfather was Jewish. And so we've always kind of, you know, this is something that Jews understand well, is that you're always questioning who's Jewish. Are you Jewish enough? You know, where's the bloodline? Is it maternal, paternal? And there's this big sort of debate over what makes a person Jewish. But at the end of the day, if you're aligning yourself with this people and you are living a Jewish lifestyle, then you are still embodying that context and are making yourself essentially a target for anyone who is anti-Semitic, essentially. So I wrote this poem, and I'll just read it, and then we can kind of unpack it. It's called A Hiding Place, obviously as a nod to Corrie ten Boom's story and all that she represents and all that she did with her life.
Yeah. Before you read, I just want to punctuate something you said. I want to underscore it because you said it's less than 100 years. This reality, I think sometimes we forget that just because of the way time is compressed right now. It feels like, oh, well, these things. And it's the same way with racial relations in America. Yep. I feel like, oh, that was so long ago. And for young people today, just because of social media, it feels like, well, that was like 6 weeks ago. Like that's a different, that's an entirely different epoch in time.
Right.
And it's not like in the course of world history, we're literally standing on top of World War One,
That's
World
right.
War Two. Like if we're to draw out a global timeline, we're literally right there on a terribly tragic and bloody reality that has still, like, grandmothers and grandfathers were walking in these stories. This was their context, and it's just good for us to remember that as we read words like this, that this is still in our families and in our
Yeah.
communities in all of these different ways. I think it's also last weekend a 30-year-old woman was stabbed to death on her doorstep,
Yeah.
and a swastika. This was in France, I believe. A swastika was painted on her door, and she
Yeah.
was stabbed. And so again, this is why we feel the way we feel, because these things are, this is our moment, whether it's
That's right.
100 years or, last weekend. These are things that we have to try to make sense of because they are our story.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And then I think we have faithful feelings if
Yes.
we allow ourselves to feel, and and poetry, like you said, is a wonderful vehicle for that. That's why I love it. It helps me to enter into another perspective, or the heart or the fear of someone in their own context. And I think that's really important, powerful. So
Yeah. A hiding
a
place.
hiding place. You could hide here on my land, inside my walls, under my family name. You could hide inside my voice, beside my marching feet, behind my posts. I have hidden your tears in mine, your hurt in my chest, your land on my soil. For a long time, Jewish blood was hidden from my story. Maybe I've been hiding it too by believing it was not enough to burn. Even if it was none, it would be enough to hide you in my veins. I will hide you in my prayers, take your language to my lips, sow love for you into the hearts of my 4 children. I will cherish my resurrected name, Galit, and craft my waves of words. Your tears will be my tears, and your joy will be my joy, and your future will be my future. What is an oath but a promise not to hide when needed most?
I love the turn at the end. We'll save that, but yeah, this literally was just written.
Yeah, and I wrote it in tears. There's some poems that you just write and it's an observation, it's a moment, and there's some poems that are written in tears. Something that I say, I have a friend and we share poems a lot, and we'll text each other poems, and she'll send me one and I'll say, that one was written in tears. You just can just tell. Yeah, I think, the idea that you can hide here, that will never happen again, at least not without me standing beside you. I think it's just a good reminder for all of our Jewish brothers and sisters to still have that in the psyche, have that kind of, that feeling still very present. And you could hide in my voice. Like, I'm not going to just even be silent. That you can hide in my poem, and I have hidden your hurt in my chest. I think when I really take into account, when I take the time to study the pogroms and the discrimination, the restrictions that are just, again, such a short time ago. Mm-hmm. This is not a long time ago. Discrimination and then genocide, mass genocide, that hurt I can take some of that in and carry that and allow myself to feel the empathy of that in a deep way.
And I think that's recovering that capacity is particularly important. I loved that. Your tears in mine,
Yeah.
Your hurt in me, in my chest.
Yeah.
That is a capacity that I think is one that in our moment to recover it, not just in these really, really dramatic places, but that same sensibility to say, how can I learn to do that with my sibling?
Mm.
How can I learn to do that with my classmate, with my neighbor, with the person in my office mate? They have their tears,
Right.
and so this helps us to open up something that is what it is to be human.
I totally agree. And I think almost it's impossible to try to live up to the golden rule without it.
Mm-hmm.
How can you treat someone the way that you would want them to treat you without first feeling something of what they might be feeling?
Yeah.
Even in conflict resolution,
Yeah.
When you do this, I feel this. There's something about being heard, and felt, understood.
Yeah.
That is important.
That's Martin Buber's framework of, are you an it? You're an object to me. Are you a you? I'm elevated above you in some sort of judgment place. Or are you a thou? And am I seeing you with the dignity that says, I want to hear that? That's, yeah. I love that. Your tears and mine.
That's right. Yeah. And then, I kind of briefly, we touched on, Jewish blood hidden from my story. And I think that kind of feeling of, living out a calling and a lifestyle, but to many people, especially within the Jewish community, not being considered Jewish enough by blood. I think there's that constant sort of, subtle identity crisis. And I think, this is my section of saying it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. There's nothing that I'm saying here, that I'm declaring here, that would require me to be even a drop Jewish. This is something that we can all agree on. If there was ever something in any way, shape, or form like a call for genocide, that all of us would link arms. Right? That is a clear, just a clear thing I wanted to declare, and sort of, it really does end with an oath. So that was an important thing for me to come to and just realize through this whole process that it is more about, my friend told me this quote, that it's not necessarily about whether your grandfather or grandmother was Jewish, but whether your grandkids will be. Are you passing that lineage down? So, and then this next part, I will hide you in my prayers. I think that we, see a lot of scriptures about praying for the peace of Jerusalem. I think that there's the Jewish people are near and dear to God's heart, and He has a calling and a path for them. I actually think that Muslims are near and dear, and God has a call for them. There's a lot in the scripture to mine there, and to pray into, and to lean into, and to wait for that redemption and that awakening inside the hearts of God's people. And this sowing love for you into the hearts of my children, I think it's important to make sure that your children are also living a life of empathy. They're living a life of compassion, but they're also living for something greater than themselves. That can happen in any generation, where you have to make really difficult decisions about taking a firm stand on something in the face of danger. And so just being aware of that, sowing into that, and it's an important piece, I think, of parenting, that you can kind of, again, in a comfortable moment, maybe not be as aware of, but as soon as you're reminded that, hold on, this world, we don't know the future. We don't know what our children will face. And I want to make sure that they are sort of built up in an understanding that you stand for things, and you stand on God's word, and you walk out your faith in integrity, and be willing to, to stand with those who are being oppressed, or possibly, just having hate slurred at them. You stand with them.
It is in our moment right now too. Again, this is, I don't want to take us on too much of a tangent, but you're touching on this distinction between values and virtues that is a modern symptom that says your values can be different than my values. And so what your truth, my truth, we can all see things differently. And the danger of that is that your genocide, my genocide, like who should be exterminated, which person, like that, it literally opens the door for a place where you can't make these stands. And And virtue is very different. Virtue, the crown of it is faith and hope and love, that there is a God,
Right.
there is a revelation of what is good and true and beautiful. And this person of God is who made us, and not just us, but all people.
Right.
And so here we have faith and hope and love, and just beneath that we have prudence. How do we see reality rightly? And it calls me to act. Well, right next to prudence is justice.
Mm.
And so I can't see reality rightly without being called to justice and to act justly, which requires courage and temperance.
That's
And so
right.
there's a way of thinking about what it is to be a person that needs to be recovered, and handed down to a next generation, so that there is a framework for saying this is a moment for courage.
Yes.
This is a moment for justice. This is a moment where prudence says that no people group should be exterminated. And so on any side of a conflict, I cannot find myself as the victim of someone being exterminated or allowing for some people group to be exterminated, nor can that wheel turn over the other way and I find myself calling for the extermination of my enemy.
That's right.
There is something that has broken that cycle, and we're called to it. And I love this. Peter Kraft, talking about love, says we don't fall in love, we rise to love. And you go, yeah, that it is a calling for your kids and my kids, but we have to train them up in the way that they should go, so that in their moment they say, I will rise to that, because it doesn't just happen.
That's right.
Sorry, I took us.
No, I love that. That's very good. That makes total sense. And I think there's certain things that you just, your values, your morals will never allow you to do. Even in, a certain moment, that you'll never, come in against civilians in this way. Like, there are certain things your values will never.
Yes.
If you're really focusing on those values, that there's lines you don't cross.
Yes. And it's good for us to say that was one, that it should never be crossed. And
That's
to be able to point to it and say no.
That's right.
And to call people to say this is a universal.
That's right. That's absolutely right. So, and then this, going down toward the end, I will cherish my resurrected name, Galit, and craft my waves of words. When I came to faith in Jesus, it was a very powerful conversion, very powerful moment in my life. And part of the thing that helped me to see him clearer was two friends of ours, very good friends of my husband's, who were Hebraic roots Christians, and they were presenting him in a Jewish context, and his Jewish moment in the Jewish world, and suddenly he came out of that cartoon picture that I think I had put him in culturally, or the culture kind of puts him in, and you just sort of absorb it. And so he became very three-dimensional, and I realized that as a truth seeker, I was always a truth seeker, I really had to give him more of a chance. I couldn't dismiss him as easily. And so it was that Hebraic context that really helped me start questioning and praying again and coming down that journey. And my husband knew he had Jewish ancestry. They have a very old Bible dating to, I think it's like the 1600s. I mean, the thing is just an artifact, and it has his whole lineage.
It's extraordinary, by the way.
Yes. And so I think he knew that, and with our friends presenting it in this context that was really resonating with us as we came down that journey and came to faith, we went right into Messianic Judaism, and my husband felt strongly about reclaiming that which was lost and seeing how these two things meet so beautifully, that Jesus is the fulfillment of everything that comes before. In Romans, it says that the Jewish people are the natural olive root and the natural olive branch, and the Gentiles are grafted in, but that they are the natural branch coming up, rising up. And so I think that there's a beautiful fulfillment, that they are emerging, and they're very cohesive, and it's one continuous story, one continuous narrative. And this idea that you have to, renounce this in order to come to faith, and you have to step away, and you're renouncing. This is a beautiful moment, the thing that we hold, that you can have both. When God says this is for the people in everlasting covenant throughout all generations, and you can still have that, and you're come to know the Messiah that was, given for all, and including Israel. And so anyway, as that was happening, before my wedding, I received my Jewish name, Galit. My rabbi up north, he was kind of making as much as he could sense out of the name Wendy and what that would relate to. And Galit is like a little wave.
Oh, wow.
That's what it means in Hebrew,
Okay.
wave. And so when I realized, as I've been kind of unpacking this, that when you're writing a poem, especially if you're taking time to address the meter, that even iambic pentameter is like little waves. Da 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 da. They're little crests and little falls. And so even poetry and song is like waves. And I just thought that was kind of a neat way that God brought that full circle. But so my little waves of words, your tears will be my tears, and your joy will be my joy, and your future will be my future. This is my Ruth moment, kind of echoes Ruth, that your God will be my God and your people will be my people, and where you go, I will go. When she says to Naomi, that kind of faithfulness of saying, well, I'm with you. Mm-hmm. And I think in context of something like genocide, saying I will stand with you, like the Corrie ten Boom statement of saying, like, I would be your hiding place, is to say that if you died, I would die. Mm-hmm. That's what it's saying. And so I think there's that Ruth moment at the end that's just declaring the kind of courage to walk with someone that closely.
What a beautiful call again for our kids, for a moment right now that's filled with such, we talked about it a while ago, visual noise and just distraction and simple banal distraction. Right. Just that's so much of just the way Western culture has become disenchanted in that way. Yeah. But there's a silver lining to that. There's a moment right now where I think our kids are, not only does the moment demand it, but they're dying for it. They're hungry to be called to something that says, no, I will stand up for people. Yeah. And I will be brave, and I will have courage. And that's part of the agency of what it is to be an image-bearing agent in the world, and that I am a participant in something rather than a spectator that is detached from suffering or detached and unaffected from. That's actually not a healthy way to try to exist, because it doesn't cohere with reality. But
yeah, and there's so many things you can do without having to be on the ground now. So like there's a lot of ways you can help, a lot of ways you can support, and what areas you feel you're called to do that you can do from anywhere. Yeah, so that's a nice moment to be a part of.
And even just the starting point being, I can have faithful feelings.
That's right.
Like it's okay for me to be a human who sees something and then has a response to it. Right. Even that actually matters. That is a little wave. It matters. It matters for me even in my own home to say this will never happen or we will not. Right.
That's right. Yeah. It's clarifying. Yeah. There's those moments that are just sort of clarifying. Yeah. And then there's the moments in between, and then you hit another clarifying moment where you kind of have to feel like, wow, I can't stand here or here. I have to really fully plant my feet on this idea in this moment, or, a crystallizing moment of saying, I would hopefully live a life that is ready to stand up for anyone who is being hurt in that way, and I don't know. I think there's just certain moments that call us into that kind of awareness, sort of shake us up, shake us awake.
Feels like that's where it feels like a clarifying moment in history right now. And for everybody who's listening, I think that's part of what is so just, I'm glad you're with us for the conversation. We get to do this, and I'm grateful for your work, Wendy, because it is a clarifying moment. Go, what do you do? And well, return to the old way, the ancient path. There is a way to walk that allows us to be who we were made to be. And so returning, even if you have a Bible at home and you go, I haven't read that thing forever, go back to it. It is the story. Yeah. And it will help us. We were just reading in a group the other day that the Bible, it's not that we interpret the Bible through our modern lens, but it's that the Bible helps us interpret modernity in a way that is coherent with what is real and not just our own vantage point. So return to Scripture. Return to poetry and to the language of faithful feelings. And this has been so beautifully shared. So thank you for this. Would you read it again?
Absolutely.
I think I would love that.
Sure.
And we can just leave it there, but I would love for you to read it again, and we'll just let this speak for itself, a hiding place.
Okay. A hiding place. You could hide here on my land, inside my walls, under my family name. You could hide inside my voice, beside my marching feet, behind my posts. I have hidden your tears in mine, your hurt inside my chest, your land on my soil. For a long time, Jewish blood was hidden from my story. Maybe I've been hiding it too by believing it was not enough to burn. Even if it was none, it would be enough to hide you in my veins. I will hide you in my prayers. Take your language to my lips. Sow love for you into the hearts of my 4 children. I will cherish my resurrected name, Galit, and craft my waves of words. Your tears will be my tears, and your joy will be my joy, and your future will be my future. What is an oath but a promise not to hide when needed most?